How did Sony, a company with zero experience in the video game industry, dominate the 5th generation of consoles? Welcome to the 4th episode of Gaming Wars, a series that looks at gaming, where it came from, how it's changing today, and where it's going in the future. This series will eventually end with the current console leaders, Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony, as well as looking at the state of mobile, computer, and platform gaming. As always, let me know what you think down below. As we found out in Gaming Wars Episode 3, after 10 years, Sega finally beat Nintendo for a short time in the United States, and definitively in Europe and South America. But by 1993, everyone was getting ready for the 5th generation of consoles. If Sega was successful in the past by having a head start and a larger library of games, the next generation of console makers were going to focus on one of two strategies. Either being first with great hardware, hoping that great games would soon follow, or focusing on giving game developers the room to push 3D games into the mainstream. Atari followed the former strategy with its state-of-the-art Jaguar.
Well, did it work?
Have you heard of the Jaguar? The problem was the complicated controller and weak third-party gaming support. Panasonic gave it another shot with the 3DO, a console that actually won Time Magazine's Product of the Year. But damn was it expensive, so it didn't sell well, and of course third-party games weren't developed. As the video game market exploded between 1993 and 1998, every tech company was jumping in on the game, including Apple. The Apple Bandai Pippin tried to be a high-end console that moonlighted as a networked computer running Apple software. Casio made a console for girls. Arcade maker SNK put out its last Nat Geo console. NEC followed up with its PCFX flop, and the dying Commodore gave it one more shot. But success in consoles requires not just good hardware, but innovative games as well. So now that the video game industry was growing, third-party developers that were tied down with exclusivity contracts to Nintendo were starting to get frustrated. And Sega wasn't doing them any favors either. Sega tried a surprise launch with the Saturn. The problem was, at the time, the only games that were ready for launch were made by Sega itself. So Sega Games got most of the money. Third-party game developers just weren't ready with any games at the time. Of course they were pissed. They weren't the only ones. Retailers were left out of the loop, so that only 4 retailers got inventory. KB Toys, a massive toy retailer before GameStop and the internet even existed, retaliated by supporting all the competitors of Sega during the 5th generation of consoles. But the Sega Saturn eventually put out some decent games. But once these games hit the market, most of them from third-party developers, it was game over for Sega. Even Bill Gates said, "Our game designer likes the Sony machine."
How did the PlayStation dominate the 5th generation of consoles so forcefully?
Well, Sony followed a different strategy. They built a developer-friendly console at a loss-leading price. And quickly, it became a hit. By Christmas, Sony sold 800,000 PlayStations in the US. Its effective marketing focused on a broader audience, including adults, late video game adopters, and older teens. They basically ignored the 15 and younger kids market that Nintendo and Sega had been battling for. And unlike the Nintendo's claims that the NES was an entertainment system, Sony actually came through on that promise by allowing the console to play music CDs. And the PlayStation was great for game developers. By using CD-ROM-based games, game developers enjoyed 2 big benefits. They could fit more content onto a disc, and they could be produced at a cheaper price compared to the cartridges on the other systems. And let's not forget that Sony initially sold this product at a loss, which eventually paid off, as they sold over 100 million units over 10 years. But Nintendo was still innovating on the sidelines. They released the Virtual Boy, the first 3D portable device, but unfortunately it was a bad idea, causing headaches and eye strain for a lot of users. Finally, 1 year after the PlayStation, Nintendo launched the Nintendo 64 with the game that defined 3D game design forever.
It's me, Mario! Hello!
The N64 had a racing hit,
Welcome to Mario Kart!
first-person shooter, action-adventure, fighting game, strategy game, and some good old Donkey Kong.
Okay.
But almost all the big hits were coming from Nintendo itself.
Wasn't Nintendo 64-bit, while the PlayStation was only 32-bit?
At this point in the console wars, processor speed and memory size were actually more important than the number of bits that the CPU could handle. But the biggest problem for the Nintendo platform was that it wasn't attractive for innovative third-party developers. The cartridges had less space than CD-ROMs, so a lot of developers had to leave out their cinematic cutscenes. They also cost 10 times more to produce. And a lot of game developers had a tough time programming for the N64 due to its limited memory design. Although some developers eventually figured out how to work around it, it was still a pain compared to the PlayStation platform. The result was the most variety and innovation in gaming was actually happening in the PlayStation ecosystem. Sega wasn't dead yet, but it needed a partner to survive. So it approached the biggest software company in the world to design an optimized version of Windows CE to run on a console supporting DirectX. This console was set to have one of the most successful launches, sparking the 6th generation console wars. That is, until Sony announced its console sequel. Taking all the air out of Sega's brief run. And now, third-party developers like Electronic Arts were important pillars of the gaming industry with considerable clout. So in the end, Atari, the company that brought video games to the masses, was on its deathbed on the corporate life support of reverse mergers and acquisitions. Other console makers left the market to Sony and Nintendo, while Sega continued fighting for survival by turning to Bill Gates for help. But Microsoft noticed that more and more DirectX developers were moving to console platforms. So in 1998, they began working on a way to keep game developers on its multimedia platform, and the prototype that they came up with was called the DirectX box. But we'll have to save that for the next episode. Stay tuned as we continue the series all the way up to the 8th generation of consoles coming out soon, while highlighting other platforms that are pushing innovation in mobile and social today. To find the best prices for video game stuff, please support the channel by clicking the Amazon links below and saving any good deals to your cart. And thanks to all you subscribers for sticking with the channel. As a lot of you guys know, I have a full-time job on the side, and now that the holiday rush is in, since I work in retail, it's become more difficult for me to put out videos on a regular basis. But I hope to get back to that, so please stay subscribed, and if you're a new viewer, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe with email notifications to join My Next Appliance, where we try to keep up with innovation everywhere, and the companies behind it. And you can also follow me on Twitter for news and good tech deals.